And welcome back, everybody, to another week at Beyond the Trailer Park. And joining me, as usual, is Beth over in Pennsylvania. How's it hanging?
It's a hanging. It's slowly but surely.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Rainy
haven't been
today.
I was going to say you haven't been flooded out today. That's good.
No, it stormed pretty good last night when I was getting ready to crawl into bed for the 850th time. And I made the mistake of taking one of my anti-dizzy pills, and I didn't get up till 4:30, 5 o'clock today.
That's okay. Hey, you're not being dizzy if you're sleeping, right?
True. Very true. Although I did get very hungry.
Yes, this can happen. Well, Ashley's got mom duty tonight, so I don't think she's going to make it over, but we do have a full house as it is, and all returning guests, although we have not had all of you on at the same time before, so that's kind of cool. So first of all, our good friend Robert Beatty over there, he's been on a couple times to talk about his pet project, Kent Hovind. So good evening, Robert, and you're still muted, just so you know.
Rob, you can unmute.
Yeah, you're still muted. He's working on it. It's all right. We'll come back in a second, Robert. And of course, Deana Holmes, you've visited us before on talking about all things Kent Hovind. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
You are quite welcome. It's good to have you back. We always enjoy hearing from you. You're still muted, Robert, just so you know. And joining us again also is the one and only Pluto Dog. How's it going?
Going pretty good. How's it going with you all?
We're doing well. It's kind of cool. Pluto joined us the first time. It was sort of by accident. So he's all up on his Hangout usage and good to go this time. And Robert, I see you're unmuted now. Good evening.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Welcome back to the show.
Okay. I can't hear myself very well, or it's different now.
Oh, okay. Not sure what's going on there, but as long as we can hear you and all of that, we'll make it work. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about that sort of revolves around Kent Hovind, if not directly about him. So all of our guests have followed all of these stories, and they follow Kent and all of his crazy bullshit that he's still doing and all of that. So the last time we talked about Kent, he had just been they had quashed the second trial, and he was about to get out of jail, but he's been awfully busy since he's been out, hasn't he, folks?
He's back in business, running at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, he seems to be booking up a lot of churches in the Slavic community. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Do you think there's a reason why he's targeting the Slavic community? Or is it just happenstance?
No, I think it's deliberate, because I think that he's taking advantage of the fact that maybe some of the elders in those communities aren't exactly fluent English speakers and totally aware of what's been going on with him.
Okay.
You just hit the nail I was driving at. Is it a language thing? Because most of your Slavic churches do not use English.
Mm-hmm.
What's that, Robert?
It's a market that seems readily available.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How much of the Slavic
that might be part of the
Sorry, what was that, Robert?
Part of the connection. Her Ukrainian background might be part of the connection that allows him to tap into
his wife's Ukrainian.
Slavic church.
Gotcha.
Actually, it's his daughter-in-law who is the
daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was that, Pluto, you were saying? You weren't sure?
I was saying I'm not clear how much of the Slavic community is the fundamentalist type, whether that's a feature of them or just what.
A lot of them are Pentecostal, so they would share certain fundamentalist Baptist beliefs, but totally eschew others. And by Kent is enough of an opportunist, he would smooth over the differences.
Well,
right.
I find it interesting that you bring that up because he was just at my favorite minister's church, Stephen L. Anderson in Arizona, which is literally in your backyard, Dee.
I've been there. I can tell you
yes,
that
yes, and that's what caught my eye on the article because Stephen Anderson is a biblical literalist. Well, letteralist, as I call him. And he's actually more Bible-based than Ken Hovind. He's kind of Westboro Baptist Church versus Mainline. He's the Westboro Baptist Church. He's very Calvinist in his views, where Ken Hovind is not. So it's kind of interesting you brought that up with the Armenian churches and their Pentecostal views because, I mean, Stephen L. Anderson and Ken Hovind, yeah, I can see on some things, but not on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they will tell you that because I had a talk with Anderson's wife, and she told me that they didn't agree with Hovind on everything. So that's no surprise to me.
Mm-hmm. And before we forget, thank you, Katie, for listening. I see you over in our Q&A.
Hi, Katie.
She goes, shit, I'm late, and y'all actually started on time.
Yes, but the Q&A is working this week, which is good because last week it wouldn't work, so this is good. So what is Hovind trying to get out of all of these talks? Is he trying to drum up new members or create a new flock, or what's his game plan, do you think?
Robert, you've got to talk about this because you know more about it than anybody.
Okay, I'll say a little bit. You can correct me or embellish my story on that. Ultimately, what he's been saying lately is he wants to build a new park and franchise it around the world and maybe get 100. And so he's looking at land in Alabama that's not too far from Pensacola. Right. And it strikes me that he's developed a gimmick to keep himself before his adoring public by asking for thousands and thousands of questions, which guarantees him a reason to be on the YouTube 2 or 3 times a day and promote his causes and answer questions forever and tap into the financial resources of its base. If it wasn't for all those questions, what would he have to say every day, all day long? Probably not much. And so he's developed that marketing strategy. He's raised some money, and he's got Ernie Land, his financial friend, and Ernie's got friends, and supposedly they're, according to Ernie, he brags about Kent having millionaire backers ready to finance him and go for it. But as is often the case, whether it's religion or politics or other business ventures, it's always good to demonstrate to the people that are really behind you that you got some people to send you some money. So Kent appears to have people sending him some money so that other people will think he really's got some support and they'll support him. Okay. And of course, if his investors are going to buy real estate in Alabama, that's probably not something they can lose money on very easily. So it looks like a real well-planned deal. He just needs to execute it.
I would just add, yes, there's a lot of questions that I have about this. Kent seems to think he can do all this stuff. Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, has he said anything about zoning? Because, like it or not, you can't just plunk down something in the middle of farmland because of the zoning.
Oh, he thinks he can.
That's what, it's part of the overall picture. Used to, he didn't like to get permits and worry about zoning. And from what Ernie bragged about on him and his millionaire backers, they would expect him to put on the air of legitimacy. And so now he's got at least 2 corporations, one for profit and one not for profit, to use as nominees to look legitimate and try to do what he wants to do. And interestingly enough, in the last week, Chris Pavey, who happens to live up in Alabama, had Kent snooping around his neighborhood looking for land, and Mr. Pavey found out that apparently the rumor up there is they told people they were going to put in a water park, and Mr. Pavey didn't want a water park in his neighborhood.
I'm going to eject him 1 second. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Anyway, back to the permit zoning. I asked Mr. Pavey about that, and that's in an area where zoning and permits are important. So if Kent's going to be building up there, he's going to have people looking over his shoulder to ensure he does it properly.
Now, do you think that Ken Ham getting all that money for his ridiculous theme park kind of gave him hope that he could pull some kind of crap off like that too?
Well, yeah, but look at the kind of things that Ken Ham has bought himself into. I mean, he's bought a lawsuit over the tax exemption, which is still going through the courts because some judge thinks it's legal, and that's not the case. When they start hiring people, that's going to be crazy because you have to sign a statement of faith, and that's, you can't have tax dollars going to that. I don't know that Alabama has the money for that sort of program, if they have anything like that going, or even if Kent can put on a good enough dog and pony show to get the money out of Alabama. I mean, that's one thing you can say about Ken Ham is he is a consummate promoter. I mean, he sold bonds, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Bonds that I would consider junk, and he sold those, and he got people to invest. So I would say he's definitely a leg up on Hovind.
Well,
I think too, Hovind is also relying on the mini RFRAs that Georgia are currently in the news for. Alabama and Mississippi also have a version, and they are both being voted on in the next 6 months. So I think he is Hovind is counting on that Alabama is going to pass, and he will be able to use the mini RFRA to discriminate if you don't agree with his statement of faith. And what many people lose in this argument, and I am part of the LGBT community, so it's something I pay attention to, is it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
I quit. How come you have your... Oh, you're talking. Okay.
That was cute. It's not just an LGBT issue, because these mini RFRAs, and we've talked about this before, can also be used. Oh, you're a woman? Sorry, women can't work here. Oh,
hey, what about you're an Episcopalian? You can't work here.
So it's not to make light of the LGBT issue, but it's not just an LGBT issue. It encompasses you're not the right type of Christian.
Yeah, it could be expanded to just about anything, It's like, oh, you drive a Ford? Ew, I don't like Fords.
That's
like,
against all they have to state in the court, if these laws go through in a court of law, is that is against my sincerely held religious
belief.
Yes,
it's a sincerely held belief.
Yeah.
So
generally, the courts will not rule on whether the church believes that or does not believe that. They take it at face value. The courts will not rule on it. So I think that's what Hovind's relying on.
I don't think Hovind's going to go there. I think he's a small enough operator that the only special consideration he might be asking for is he's going to use his tax-exempt corporation to buy it as tax-exempt and claim it's a religious organization, so he would be justified in hiring people that believe like he does.
Right.
I don't think there's enough of anything else to support any special tax incentives or anything like that.
Basically what Ken Ham has done. He's saying Actually, he's talking out both sides of his mouth. He's saying that it's a for-profit business, but it's a non-for-profit business because it's a ministry. And this is where another one of your inches, Robert, comes into play, the whole ministerial exception.
Yes.
Who is a minister and who is not?
Well, the problem with Ken Ham is he's asked for a lot more in specific benefits.
Yeah.
Apart from just being tax exempt, he's asked for all those other things that has caused him those problems.
I would never work for him. I would never work for Ken Ham, and I would never work for the art park. You know why? Because that thing sits in a special zone. Okay, anybody who is employed in that zone will pay 2% of their income to the zone. It's like, hello, I'd rather work in my nice secular, not in a zone, and keep all my money.
Yeah, I just read about that today, about the zoning thing of having to pay a percentage of their income to the zone thing. And I'll interject here. Normally I wait till after the show to put a link to somebody's page and stuff, but we're going to be dropping a lot of names, and I mean a lot of names. We already have with the Chris Peavy, but if you really want to read up on this, and I'm not tuning Robert's horn because he's a friend of mine, but he really has provided really good coverage of everything this entails, what we're going to talk about tonight. So please do visit his page. I did post the link in the group page, and I'll include it later. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of names flying around.
Well,
I can't even keep it straight.
When you talk about it like that, where you have to give, even though it's 2% to the zone, that almost sounds like a tithe.
Well, it does, but it's a tax, and I'm not sure. You know, it's a tax on you for having the privilege of a job selling hot dogs at the art park, and I'm like, you're not getting paid enough anyway to start. And then they're going to take 2% because you have a privilege, you know.
It's like us paying $10 every year.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're over a barrel. I mean, I know people that 2% being taken off the top of their paycheck is kind of a lot.
Yeah. Well, and for some people, depending on what they pay, that could make the difference of I can have a car payment, or I can, pay my rent or whatnot. They may end up having to get a smaller apartment and all kinds of crap like that. That's a sizable chunk when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. And now that silly ARC thing is supposed to be ready by July, isn't it? Like, that's insane. The last I saw it was...
I try not to pay attention to it because it bothers me so badly that somebody... It's so annoying.
It crops up on my news feed occasionally, and the last time I saw it, when I was like 3-4 weeks ago, it was still like, 3/4 of this crazy arc in the middle of a dirt field. Like, that's all there was. So I'm like...
Yeah, it's slated to open in July.
I have believing it'll be fully operational in July.
Yeah. I do too. I'm looking at that and
some way to operate it in a very limited basis. It doesn't look like it's going to make it.
It's about 2/3 of the way built. But if you want really good, fairly good coverage of the legal implications and some of the bullshit surrounding with Ken Ham, specifically Dan RL of Danthropology, Son Pathos, he's been following it pretty closely, so I will say it is kind of biased, but in a sense that, of course, is coming from a secular point of view. And actually, Ken Ham has actually singled out Dan as far as criticism. But it's pretty good coverage, and he does, provide links to outside sources, so it's not just his opinion. He has real good coverage. If you want Hovind, you go to Robert.
That's right. So Hovind thinks...
I had to let somebody else handle the heavy lifting on Hovind. Adequate, and I keep asking for more coverage, but nobody seems that interested.
Yeah.
Well, you were trying to get him to debate you for the longest time, and he was having none of it.
That's ongoing. My
Are you
challenge
still-
remains outstanding.
Did he ever
We got-
actually
we-
respond, or did he just ignore you?
I think his tactic is to ignore me, but once in a rare moment, he will make a reference to me. But it's been a while since he's done that.
Yeah.
We've got the challenge outstanding if he ever comes around. And you know, what he's gotten into is he doesn't go out and ask people to debate him. What he keeps saying is, "You get it together, I'll be there." He wants his people to put it together, and he'll show up. Well, I can play that game too. I keep asking people because he won't talk to me. You get hold of Kent. I'm seeing him. We got things to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, what I find really funny with the whole situation of debating Kent, not only have you asked for Kent, you have asked for, as you phrase it, his champions. So for people that have listened to prior episodes where we've talked with you about this, that includes people like Rudy Davis, and now there's a Chris Ann Hall, who is...
for God's sake, her?
It's like you have these challenges out and you've laid out your propositions, and if I remember correctly, you have like 46 of them pertaining to his legal case, and not just his legal case, but pretty much the whole shebang, and they all ignore you. They all, it's like they do not take you seriously, and it's like, well, if he's that easily dismissed, then debate.
I think they have taken me seriously, and Kent has explained what's going on here. It's because I'm right and they are wrong.
Yeah.
But as for his, that's Kent's famous line. The reason Dawkins and the others won't debate him, Kent says it's because he's right and they're wrong. Well, that has better application when it comes to his legal problems. He knows I've got him on the ropes. He's wrong and I'm right, and he has nothing to gain by coming out. And speaking of his champion, I wouldn't put Rudy Davis in that category, but I'd be glad to talk to Rudy about it. But even, let me mention this real quick. Today, he tells who those champions are in a cryptic sort of way. He said he had 3 lawyers working on his spring surprise and other people from around the world. He won't name them. He won't send them over to me. He doesn't want them talking to me. And on Dan Benandi's YouTube channel today, some smart aleck anonymous poster challenged me, and I accepted his challenge. And instead of get serious, he popped off saying, "Where in Title 26 of the USC does it even define a taxpayer? It's not there. It's not part of the law."
Oh, for God's sake.
You know, at first I said, "Okay, I'll accept that. I don't care. What difference does it make?" But then with a couple of clicks, it just so happens that in Title 26 USC, it does specifically define taxpayer in about 10 words, and I sent that in crickets.
Yep.
Of course.
Can I talk about his what was originally going to be his February surprise, and now?
Oh yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk
do.
about his February surprise. That's now sliding into April now. To deal with his February surprise, April surprise is not like a May December marriage. Is that he has really gone onto the sovereign citizen bandwagon, and the reason I mentioned it is because you mentioned Chris Ann Hall, who is absolutely drunk the sovereign citizen Kool-Aid, and she was in the area, if she didn't actually go out there, of those the Oregon occupiers, the guys who took over the bird refuge. She was up in that area during the time. So that's the kind of people that are Kent's defenders. They are people who, you know, don't have a sure grasp on the law and the Constitution. And when Kent tells me And from having to talk to some of his supporters and from Ernie Land and those guys, I can say that I honest to God doubt that he's talking to a real honest to God attorney. I think he is talking to somebody who maybe has set himself up as a judge, or Ernie, who thinks he knows more law than anybody else, is a frustrated non-lawyer. That's what I think. But Ted, on this thing, I'm waiting to see the documentation because I'm sure it is going to be absolute, pure, unadulterated sovereign citizen Kool-Aid.
Well,
and it's go ahead, Beth.
Well, I was going to say that kind of piggybacks off what I was going to say is that, and why I bring up Kent Hovind and why this ties into Oregon and the Bundys and the other messes is the whole sovereign citizen platform. And what is really bizarre, I find, with the sovereign citizen movement is they do not rely on current case law. If you look at a lot of their stuff, it's old. There's some that they're quoting cases going back into 1800s. Last I looked, we're in 2016, and most of these cases have been adjudicated. Well, they have been adjudicated. Most of these cases, and I'll say a good 60-65% of them, have been adjudicated, re-adjudicated, and precedent has been set that they're wrong. So basically, they're using old case law that says, oh, this is right, when in actuality, a case in 1970, for example, I'm just throwing a date out, has said, no, this case is like totally back-assward, and you're wrong. And this is what, like you said, Deana, this is kind of like what Ken Hovind is relying on, and I'll use Chris Ann Hall, and this is another name drop. She's like saying stuff that, yeah, 300 years ago it was okay, but not now. I mean, case law has shown, and this is also the same problem with the Bundys and the bullshit that happened in Oregon. I mean, I have my personal view where, basically I think they should have just bombed the shit out of them and got it over with on day one, but obviously, we have collateral damage we have to worry about, and plus it's a historical place, but I mean, it's crazy. That's why these all tie in, because behind Kent Hovind, behind the Bundys, behind Oregon is sovereign citizen movement. And it's Robert, you come back to this a lot in your postings, paper terrorism.
They're very good at it.
Yes.
So what would you call paper terrorism? Is that a lot of litigation, or what is that?
Right.
Exactly?
One of their tactics is, on the losing side of a position, file as much paper as you can to frustrate the man. Make him spend money, make him spend resources. Kent spent the last 9 years when he was in prison, or 8, filing stuff over and over. He filed 100 motions and appeals, and he lost them all.
Of course.
And that's one of their tactics. You get a $25 speeding ticket. Why would you invest $10,000 of time and effort fighting it? And yet they do. They got this thing about traveling as opposed to driving, and they will go and, with some success, frustrate local law enforcement and judicial authorities. And once in a while, one of them will maybe win on some point that's not particularly relevant and proclaim victory to the whole world, when fundamentally they're losers. But if they can make the government spend money on them, they figure that's a victory, and it gets them some points, as I often refer to.
And so, to me now, I kind of followed the Oregon thing a bit, being in Canada and all. It wasn't super huge news, and I don't have cable either. But what were they trying to accomplish by taking over this federal bird sanctuary? Like, what was the deal with that?
Their whole goal is So people who live back east and that sort of thing don't really understand that a lot of our lands in the West are federal lands. They're either in parks, they're BLM land, they're military land, that sort of thing. These guys don't like that. In short, what they want to do and what this whole bird sanctuary takeover was about is they want the lands returned to the state, and then the state is supposed to manage them and parcel them out. And of course, anybody who's lived in a state back out here in the West, in Utah especially, oh my God, you do not even want that happening.
Yeah.
It was attempted armed extortion.
Right. And I thought that was kind of crazy that they could just waltz in there with rifles and shit and nobody did anything. Like, I was floored by that.
Well, you got to remember,
I think
it was quote closed.
It was a lawn.
What's that, Robert?
It was a logistical law enforcement nightmare.
Okay.
They brought a lot of people in there to take that place over, and Burns, Oregon was not ready for it. And that's part of why I think it took, because they did not have the mindset of Beth to just go in there and blow them away. And it seemed to work for the most part, despite the time and effort involved. One of the things I thought was interesting and a little humorous is when they went in there, Bundy was talking about, oh, we could be here for years. As long as it takes, we're going to give the property back to its rightful owners. And supposedly they were working all on that. And then after he got arrested, he said, I just want to go home.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and then the other thing I found to be amusing, like you said, oh, you know, they're going to get the property back to its rightful owner. Well, that would be some Native Americans, I believe, who decided that perhaps they needed to get out so that they could have it back.
Yeah, that would be the Burns Indian Band, and they and their ancestors have been in the area for something like 9,000 years, I think. You know, and in fact, their original reservation, which the government shrunk down considerably, was pretty much encompassed the wildlife refuge. Now they're restricted to 550 acres near Burns. You know, it's kind of a pain in the neck for them. But I'm sure they were absolutely offended, although they've been really good about not showing their fury with these guys. But these guys, they just waltzed in. And this is the thing. It really amazes me that they went in there and then had the temerity to ask for snacks.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, they were supposedly planned for this.
Yes.
How do you plan this without not bringing your Cheetos? Come on.
and they had a whole list of stuff, like not just the snacks, but all kinds of. Yeah, like, yeah, and then there was, you know, Finicum sitting out there in a wheelbarrow under a tarp. I mean, it was just crazy. and this is when they did plan. Could you imagine when they didn't plan?
Maybe they did in fact plan, and they were surprised that their takeover was successful. They planned for failure.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a fair point. Absolutely.
I think that they may have been pushed into doing what they did because there were rumors that circulating that the government was going to move in as far as taking care of the Bundys for the 2014 incident. So they may have heard something. But, you know, I was one of the more vociferous critics of the government, but I have to admit that as far as handling it, they handled it as probably as good as anybody could have, you know, hope for, with the exception of Lavoy Finicum, who, you know, was determined not to be taken alive and got himself killed for his trouble.
And I think that seemed to be pretty deliberate. I mean, he'd been quoted numerous times saying, you know, I'm not going to go to jail and they're not taking me alive and all of that. And I think that he did that deliberately. But, you know, that it got to be such a mess there after a while, because at one point, you know, they were saying, you know, come on, all of you fellow, I guess, sovereigns or whatever, come and help us. And then that one group showed up and they, oh, well, not you guys, ew, like, no, we don't want you. And that was kind of amusing.
I think that shows you that just like any ideology, whether it's religious or political or whatnot, sovereign citizen, there is splinter within the overall group that, oh no, not you. And I think in some ways, and then this is just a fly-by-night theory on my part, is that Kent Hovind wants to be the king of this movement. Because if you look at his actions throughout, like, you know, with his BS, and then you throw in the whole Oregon mess, and he was pretty peeved that they took his thunder. And I think that's why we're seeing his February surprise now become a spring surprise. So it's supposed to be March, and March is almost over, as Deana pointed out. Now we're going into April, and you know, and his whole premise is, you know, and Robert, you pointed this out, that his spring surprise might even be, I'm suing the government. You know, enough people signed this petition, and we're gonna win. He's getting piss poor legal advice, or taking, you know, whether it's he himself or his quote so-called advisors, and he's getting it from this movement. And if he quote were to win, that would make him king of the sovereign movement, because no sovereign citizen has ever beat the government.
Yeah, I don't think he's planning on trying to sue the government in any legitimate sense. From his latest comments, which are rather cryptic, he says he wants 10,000 people with $3 to sign something to send to somebody, and somehow that's going to get his conviction overturned, getting millions in damages, and maybe even get the structuring law repealed. He needs to flesh that out and explain it to us, because it doesn't make any sense. And except for his public relations fundraising ploy, there's no legitimate reason why he shouldn't be open and honest about what he's doing. And that's fine, we'll play it out, but there's no good reason for him to be so secretive except for his fundraising and PR gimmickry.
Well, that's why I think he's going for the, quote, king of the Sov movement, for the simple reason, I mean, there is no precedent. I think there's only one case that I can think of, and it really, underneath it all, it wasn't a sovereign citizen tactic, but there's only one case in the last 150 years where a sovereign citizen has triumphed, for lack of a better word, over the government. The government has won every single case in the sovereign citizen movement. And if he were to appear to win, or appear to put the government in bad light, he would become the dominant person within. He and his advisors would become the dominant people within that movement. And if you look at this, go ahead.
He did say something today which is similar to what they're doing out in Oregon. And what he said today is that this spring surprise is going to involve information that will show how corrupt his prosecution was. And all along, part of his gimmick is to attack everybody associated with his prosecution rather than justify his position that he's innocent. That's what they're doing in Oregon. They're setting up and starting their attacks against everybody involved in the prosecution, as if that was relevant.
They're not attacking the issues, they're attacking everything besides the issues.
So what is the Oregon crew being charged with?
Oh, God, an armload of stuff. Basically, at the beginning, they were charged with interfering with a federal officer in the discharge of their duties, and they've since added other charges, including, you know, some gun charges, some other stuff. And a lot of these same people have been charged in similar fashion in Nevada. So you have two federal courts who are now trying to figure out who is going to get these guys first. We may see a trial on, you know, in one or both of them this year. It's because they've shown every indication that they want to go to trial immediately. The Oregon trial, I believe, has been declared complex, which kind of puts it outside of speedy trial rules.
Okay.
The Nevada trial, yeah.
There was a news report today that a bunch of them in Oregon filed an interlocutory appeal to try and block being sent in a couple of weeks back to Nevada. Could you comment on the impact of that?
We'll just have to see how that plays out. It would go to the Ninth Circuit. I haven't had a chance to look at that. I understand why they're doing it. Frankly, who wants to be carted around by Con Air? It's got to be unpleasant. But they have also refused to be indicted at a distance. So this makes it kind of difficult. I mean, it's just a way of trying to forestall the inevitable. So, given that some of them have refused to go to Nevada or refused to have the charges read to them in Oregon and respond remotely, I don't think the Ninth Circuit's gonna play ball with these guys. I think they're gonna have to go to Nevada and answer the charges and then come back. And then there will be a trial or 2 or 3 or 5 or 8. It's going to be ugly, just super ugly. So.
Woe be unto the first one that makes a deal.
Yeah.
Bundy.
I don't think it's going to be Bundy. You know who I think is going to be the first one to make a deal? It's going to be Pete Santilli.
Well, I was avoiding that name.
We got to talk about that guy at some point. I mean, I've only recently learned who when we did our conspiracy theory show, Beth, and I choked down some Alex Jones time there. That's when I know what the things I do for this show. He had Pastor Manning on with him. It was really. It was like they needed to get a room, those two, I tell you. But that's when I first heard about Santilli, and I had watched a couple of his shorter videos, and I'm like, that guy's just crazy. So he fancies himself some kind of journalist, YouTube guy, and then he like inserted himself into this whole shebang, or was he kind of peripherally involved in the first place?
He has promoted himself as being a journalist interested in these sorts of things, but he's actually more of a recruiter on the internet using his radio show. I think the federal charges in the Nevada case laid out pretty clearly as to how he was basically inciting people to come up to Nevada because the feds were taking the Bundy's cattle and all that. Oh my God, you need to be there. As for me, I was absolutely convinced the guy was right smack in the middle of it on the night that Ammon and the rest of those guys were arrested up on the way to John Day. I watched it live. I can tell you, watched it live on YouTube when he sat there and he told Blaine Cooper, who was still at the refuge at that point, that he needed to take control. And then he got out of the car, and a few minutes later, he was in cuffs. So as far as I'm concerned, he's involved. But I think that the government might be willing to make a deal with him more willingly than with the others because they don't want to put the whole he's a journalist thing to the test, so they might be more willing.
That makes sense.
On his journalism claim, in his defense, many of us who aggregate news stories would fall into the same category, in my opinion, as Pete Santilli. I do not like the man. I do not like what he stands for. I do not like his style of journalism. But whether the law looks at a journalist as somebody that works for a newspaper or news outlet or an independent person such as Pete Santilli has not really been tested. And I think Deanna's right. The problem I have with Pete Santilli is he inserted himself into the debacle. Same with Debbie Fiore, the congressman from Nevada. She has inserted herself into the fiasco, not as a mediator, she purposely went against, and others, not just her, purposely went against law enforcement who said, please do not go to these people. Let us handle it, and they did it anyways. That's where I have a problem. He was told not to touch this. He touched it. Whether you think the government is overreaching or not, they are still our law enforcement. They are still our government. There are other means to protest. Like I said in the beginning, I think the whole Oregon thing was doomed from the start, and I really think the government should have just bombed the hell out of them. But I know in the real world that does not work. Waco
Not so
being
much.
Waco being a really good example, and for those of us that are old enough to remember.
Well, but the difference, at least with this, is that this was just a bunch of guys. They didn't have any family or children or anything involved. It was just a bunch of men up there. Although they're now, where did the teenage girl come from that was in the truck with Finicum? Because that
Victoria Sharp. Okay, that's a story in and of itself. The Sharp family singers. I can't remember the mother's name, but I'm sure you can find it by Googling. Anyway, Sharp family singers. The mother is a piece of work. The oldest son, you can find this on the interwebs. He was the subject of a court case where the state had to justify taking him away from Mama because of the severe environment in which he was being raised, and they upheld it. So we've got Victoria. She just turned 18. She's got a passel of siblings, and they sing, and that's how they already had this inclination. So they basically showed up to sing at various events, and that's exactly what happened. What was going on was the family was supposed to sing at this John Day meeting, and John Day is the name of a town in Oregon, in eastern Oregon. So I thought it was clever of the police. They let the car, this SUV carrying the Sharp family singers go through, but Victoria was in the truck with LaVoy Finicum and that stuff. So that's how she ended up in there, because she was taking a long time to get ready.
Okay.
We were all 18 once. Women were all 18 once. We all know that.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I was too busy with a hockey stick.
What's that?
There were a number of other women and children involved from time to time in the occupation. So it wasn't just men. Shauna Cox, I think, is one of the leaders of the women, and
then we
Sean
also
Anderson's wife.
Yeah, Sandy Anderson at the end, she was there. I watched more of her than I care to admit on YouTube.
Okay, because that was a little confusing, and like I said, from here, I was only getting sort of bits and pieces because I don't have cable news or anything, so I was sort of getting the periphery of it all. But that one,
hello everybody.
Hello. When that standoff at the end happened, and they were reporting on it, and I'm like, then they trot her out as this witness to say, oh, well, they killed Finicum in cold blood and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where the hell did she come from? So, that makes more sense.
If you watch the video that the police put out, she is absolutely the only person in that video who reacts like a normal person. She is hysterical. She's normal, okay? I actually have to hand it to her for being normal. She realized the really deep shit that they were in, as opposed to LaVoy and the rest of them. She realized they were in big trouble. So, and I think she might have helped the other three. The other two realized that they had to follow the orders of and not follow LaVoy.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know that guy is crazy.
oh yeah. I mean, come on, who sits in a wheelbarrow in the middle of, wherever that was, and under a tarp, and talking to people through the damn tarp? Like, there was something missing up there. I'm pretty sure. But
I have a
and
comment about Pete.
yep.
Uh, Beth's comments led me to think that what he's charged with has to do with his actions independent of being a journalist. I won't fuss about him being a journalist, but the charges have to do with what he did independent of that. And I think the effort to play the journalism card is just smoke and mirrors. When it comes down, if he ever gets into trial, there won't be anything about his journalism that's relevant. It'll be what he did to organize and those other things in detail that cooperated with the conspiracy to effect the illegal takeover. And I recall when he was arrested on the gun charge back in December, one of the things he said is that he was on his way to Oregon, the details of which are not given. So apparently he was involved.
Oh, he froze up.
Back in Ohio. And once he got out there, he was in his element, doing his thing, and taking part in the guise of reporting.
Well, and the few videos that I could stomach to watch, I mean, he's like, oh, I'm reporting on this. But he was making phone calls to people and talking to people and it wasn't like, hey, what's your story? It's like, okay, this has happened and now this needs to happen, and like even in his own videos you could tell that he was not just an observer, that he had his hands in the pie somewhere. It wasn't clear how or why, but he obviously was more than just reporting on it. And realistically, he's the only guy that got arrested, quote, reporting on it, and the press from all over the world was looking at it. So that's
Well, I think part of the problem, and again, this is in his defense because I catch myself doing it, is that I was always taught that being a reporter or being a journalist, one has to maintain being very unbiased.
Yes.
And I don't think that he was able to keep his bias out of his reporting.
Oh, no.
And there have been accusations, for lack of a better word, that he basically is in competition with Alex Jones. Now, if you notice with Alex Jones, he does not always get his hands dirty. So I will give Pete Santilli credit there, is that he does go to the source, so to speak, of when things are happening, but he loses his incorruptibility as far as bias goes. And I know there are certain subjects that are personal to me where my bias goes out the window, but I realize that and I know that now, and like when I write a blog post, I'll say, well, if I was being unbiased about the, I know when my bias is forget about it. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be unbiased. I'm going to let my bias show through. But I don't think Pete. So I think sometimes he does not realize there's nothing wrong with reporting on what happened, and there's nothing wrong with being a quote reporter on the ground, so to speak. But he lost that he allowed his biases to show through, and like Rob said, I think he's going to try to use that. Oh, I'm a journalist. Oh, sorry, you lost that the second you let your bias out.
It's not just his bias. He took action. That's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pluto, you broke up there a little bit. You want to say that last part again?
I say that son of a bitch was a part of it. It was not just about bias.
Yeah.
Well, that's like I say, the few videos that I did watch, like he's in his hotel room and he's phoning, people that are involved. So how do you have, like, Bundy phone numbers and stuff? Like, what are you doing? And
remember him remember him blocking a vehicle in Nevada, blocking
Okay.
a government vehicle.
Mm-hmm. I don't recall that, but yeah, so he was actively trying to block government agents from accessing.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's not good. And when we talk about Nevada, that was the Cliven Bundy thing.
Right.
Yes. And so now Cliven ended up hauling his butt down there, and that's why he's in jail. Seemed like kind of a stupid move on his part, wouldn't it?
That was actually a great move on the part of the government, because he actually had told the press a few days earlier, because I read it in the Guardian. He had told them, "I'm on the no-fly list." Well, he showed up in Vegas, and they let him on a plane, but apparently, according to all accounts, they screened everybody really closely, which should have been a clue to Cliven that, he was in big trouble. But no, he got on the plane, got to Oregon, and you know what? They just arrested him right at the gate. And, no harm, no foul, and that was the end of that. And that turned out to be a really good, good thing, because he had, for the last, 18, 19 months, 20 months, he's been surrounding himself with these armed yahoos, and, and of course the government's not going to go in. They're trying to desperately avoid that sort of thing, and so far they've managed to work it out pretty well, I'd say.
That did work well from the government's perspective, but yeah, and I got the sense of, when they did surrender, Cliven was pretty pissed that that Ammon and those guys kind of gave it up. He was expecting them to fight a bit harder from the sound of it.
Well, he wanted them to.
I don't think his kids wanted to be martyrs, to be perfectly honest. I think,
why
one of them's got 7 kids. The other one, that's Ryan. Ryan has 7. Ammon's got several. I mean, they're thinking of their kids. Gaston Cliven's 69. Yeah, he's got 14 kids or 15 kids. He's kind of up there. Maybe he thought, I've lived a good life and I can go down as a martyr. But, the government has some things to say about that.
Well, and the other thing that I found really interesting, and people who know me know that studying Mormonism is a pet project of mine, but a lot of these guys were Mormons, correct?
Yeah, that's true. The Bundys, all of them to a man, were Mormon. Lavoy Finicum and his family were Mormon. In fact, Lavoy, before his untimely demise, lived out in Cane Beds, which is only a few miles from what they call the Crick or the Twin Towns. So he would have had some relation with the people in the FLDS controlled towns. But, and there may have been a few others, but Ammon coached his language. You read the stuff that he and Ryan put out. There's a heavy layer of, Mormon constitutionalist thinking that comes straight out of, oh God, what is his name? Cleon Skousen, who's this guy. He's deceased, thankfully. He's no longer with us, sparing his poison. And I say that deliberately because he was very anti-civil rights and had some terrible things to say about Martin Luther King and that sort of thing. So I don't have a whole lot of respect for the man. He had some odd ideas about the Constitution. Glenn Beck really promotes the heck out of not Cliven, but Cleon Skousen. But that's where that stuff comes from. I mean, it's all springs from Cleon. I have never wanted to get myself involved in that stuff because I can't.
Yeah.
Well, most of your sovereign citizens, and most of your right-wing nut jobs will carry a copy of the Constitution in their pocket, which was printed by and written by Cleon Skousen. And Cleon Skousen had a habit of inserting his commentary in these pamphlets, and the problem is his commentary was esoteric, to say the least, and people like Glenn Beck and those within the Dominionist movement have glommed onto this. And you will find a lot of Cleon Skousen's writings also being espoused by people like David Barton.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And others within the right-wing movement. And if you follow the what I call the Reich or the Dominionist movement or, you know, your Reconstructionists, they go for a lot of Cleon's writings because he is a separatist in a sense that it's, are you the right type of Christian? And most of your right-wing extremist groups will fall back on some of his writings. Not always all, but Glenn Beck is a really good example. He really touts his writings. And I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm not saying he's right. He's a nut job, as Deana says. He's just for a general population like like those of us here to read the stuff that he writes, we'd just be shaking our heads. His views are very, in my opinion, anti-American. But yeah, he's a root of a lot of the evil in this movement, and they rely on his writings a lot, too much. I believe Ruby Ridge, his writings were involved in that as well.
So, and Katie's got some good comments over in the Q&A there, and she's actually provided a link to, I guess Shauna Cox actually shot video inside the truck before Finicum was shot. So she's got I just put it on the event page there, a link to that video so you can see what goes on there. But and as in terms of Cliven Bundy, she was also saying that they were waiting to get Cliven away from his bodyguards so that they could apprehend the guy. So the trickery worked well in that sense, for sure. So now
that reminds me of another recent case across on the internet. Last year, I think a case in Texas finally came to an end. It involved a local situation with a certain oddball, and the local sheriff didn't want, and the guy and his family, according to the reports, the guy and his family wound up on their acreage for like, and the sheriff figured that's as good as any jail time. We'll just let him do that. And finally, I think last year they said the situation came to an end. I don't know if they dismissed the charge or what. That detail eludes me. But it came to an end after 15 years. So that may be analogous to the Cliven Bundy situation. He surrounds himself with these guards. He kind of stays to himself on his own property, and the government just waits him out. And they finally got him.
Yeah. Yeah, and so now the other part of the whole Oregon thing that I remember hearing about was these two brothers that had done jail time for arson or something, and
it was a father and son who had done jail time. Let me explain to you what happened there. They had gone to trial before the charges had gone to the jury. Before the jury came back, the father and son had made a deal with the government that they would accept. I think it was one charge of arson. They had been charged with several. The government's like, okay, fine, because in the government's mind, that charge carries a mandatory 5-year sentence. Come sentencing time, the judge in the case is like, no, I am not giving them the mandatory minimum. They get a year and a day. So the federal government appealed. That went to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit said, no, this guy's got to be resentenced. The government appealed again to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, we're not touching this. The Ninth Circuit stands. So it went back to the federal district court, and I don't know if the same judge did the resentencing or if it had gotten passed to another judge. Different judge, right. But anyway, so they got the 5-year sentence, of course, with time served, obviously. But they are, they've they've got to finish serving out their sentence. And the thing is, a lot of people complained about that, but when that law was put in place, I think it was about 93, 94, people were saying, we have so much crime, we have to have mandatory minimums in place. And so these guys got bit by the mandatory minimum bug.
Right.
I feel bad for them in that way, because really mandatory minimums tie the hands of the judges. But the flip side is that, the real law and order types, that's what they wanted.
Yeah. So, in other words, they had been released, but then because of the overturn, they were supposed to go back to jail. And so the idea was, well, they've already paid their dues. It's wrong that they have to go back. Was that the complaint?
That was pretty much it, that they've already, their original sentence was 1 year and 1 day, and that should be all that they had to serve.
And they claim that was double jeopardy. Complete misunderstanding of the law.
Well,
that I'm not even going to go there.
So now, how does that tie in with the Oregon crowd? Were those two guys involved with the takeover? Or?
No, in fact, they lived in Harney County, but their situation was used as fuel for what the Bundys and their friends did. Their situation was basically, that gave them the excuse to go in and hold try to hold the refuge.
Okay.
That was not, and in fact, the two went to prison as expected. They're in prison right now. You look them up. The Hammonds are in prison, and they're serving their time. They said nothing to encourage these guys. Now, the older Hammond's wife, she got kind of caught up in some sovereign citizen stuff, but she hasn't said a lot lately. But, during the first part of January, before it started getting real, she had gotten caught up with Bruce Doucette, who's this fake judge out of Colorado. And do you remember that, Pluto?
And prior, I wasn't listening to what you were saying, I'm sorry, but I was going to say prior to January when they went to Malheur, the Bundys had gone to the Hammonds and tried to get them to resist going to jail. They wanted to start it that way. And the feds told
the Hammonds weren't for that.
The feds told the Hammonds, you try that, you're going to really be sorry. So.
Well, I think part of the problem, too, is that, like you mentioned, the Hammonds wanted nothing to do with the Bundys, but basically what the Bundys did, from my understanding, is took the Hammonds' case and said, use this as another example of government overreach as far as the BLM goes. What they did with Cliven and his cattle grazing is, they said, is the arson charge. They're saying that it was on their own land, and at the same time, they tried to confuse the issue with what they did was on their own land, but no, it wasn't their land. It was actually government land, so it was, it was arson on government land. And it's the whole idea that the government cannot own land, outside of, what is it, Article 1, Section 8, something that you'll hear Chris Ann Hall push, and that's one of Rob's one of your propositions with her, is that it doesn't say that. The government can own lands, and the government does own land. And what people sometimes forget is this land that the Bundys are contending on their ranch predates them even being there. I mean, they have documents that show that the government owned this land long before the Bundys even came there. So behind all this is that mix-up, and I think that's how the Bundys wanted to get the Hammonds involved, and it backfired.
Okay. Yeah, because that was a little confusing to me as sort of a peripheral follower, so that makes sense. So they were looking to have them as sort of the rallying point, and they themselves said, no, thank you. We already have enough jail time, thanks. Wow, that's nuts. So now, what was the involved with choosing that particular location as their sort of fort, I guess, the sanctuary? Was that just a strategic location, or was that just what happened to be closest?
I think it was because it was near to the Hammonds, actually. I mean, it's the
Okay.
same county. In fact, I think the Hammonds, the land they own, butts up against the refuge, and the Hammonds had some negative, shall we say, interactions over the past 2 decades with the Forest Service.
Right.
It's not helpful.
Okay.
Well, I think too, at the time of the occupation, it was basically unoccupied. There weren't a lot of people there, and the day they took it over, it was actually, for lack of a better word, closed. So there was actually nobody there, other than maybe 1 or 2 people. So they didn't have any resistance. And in their credit, I think that was intentional, because they didn't, they don't want to kill innocent people per se. So, I think it goes back to they were prepared, but they were unprepared in the sense that this was in the works. They were planning this, but this situation with the Hammonds presented them the what they thought the ideal time to do it. So they pushed a different plan ahead, and that's why you saw the pleas for dildos. Oh, I mean, Cheetos.
Snacks. Cheetos and snacks.
Yes,
Yes.
Snacks and underwear.
I gotta say that was the funniest shit when they ended up with the bags of dicks and the giant tub of lube. That was priceless.
I think the whole thing for me, and this is going back to Kim Davis, there's a meme going around with a photo of her basically saying, with her whining, crying, I didn't get no bag of dicks. I'm sorry, but that one just hit me, because it's like, everybody knows my passion for the Kim Davis affair, and that when that came out, I was like, oh, this is priceless.
Well, I saw the video of the one guy who was all pissed off that people were sending him all this useless stuff, and they're actually, aside from the bags of dicks, which if anybody doesn't know, they're actually like little gummy penises, so they're actually quite edible.
I sent them a bag.
I didn't know that.
I sent them a bag of gummy penises.
Good job.
I did. I spent the money. I felt so good about this. I spent the money. I had it sent. I even got acknowledgement that they had been received. I'm sure they got trashed. Yeah, and I paid extra money to have the glitter put on them.
Oh, sweet. Edible glitter. Awesome.
Because I couldn't send what I really wanted to send, which was a flaming bag of dog poo.
Yes.
Oh yes.
That would have made the right statement, but bags of dicks are good. So yeah, the bags of dicks, see, they wanted snacks. The bags of dicks were perfectly edible, and I've actually, I've seen pictures of the bags of dicks, and I'm like, if somebody sent me a bag of dicks, I would actually enjoy that. So, if you want to send me a bag of dicks, great. But there were people that, in that box, if you look at that video, there were actual dildos in there as well. But the bags of dicks were the little gummy guys, so they look kind of tasty, actually. So,
You guys are having too much fun talking about this.
We are having too much fun.
I think what's so frustrating with this Oregon thing, if we take away all the legal BS and everything, is that this past week I've seen some pictures of the damages that they caused to the reserve, and as one who enjoys archaeology, as heretical woman knows, she got me hooked on a show called Time Team, which is out of England, and it was not only a bird reserve, but it was also a lot of our native heritage is there. And
gotcha.
they not only did they destroy the buildings and the contents within the buildings and punch holes in walls and alcohol and condoms and everything else, they destroyed Native American archaeology. Right now, I think the bill is up to $5.6 million.
Oh,
That bill, let me just be clear, it also includes the fact that they had to move a bunch of people because they were being threatened. Also, they had to put in a lot of security at other locations, not just refuges, but BLM places. But still, I mean, it's well over $1 million to fix that, and they put it in the trench. Come on, people.
Yeah, they dug a trench. Wasn't it right next to a dig they were doing for artifacts?
Yeah, I think it's they just, you know, the local tribe is unhappy because their ancestors' artifacts have been damaged. You know, the occupiers said that the place was in better condition than when they got there. Those pictures told a totally different story.
I find that hard to believe. Yeah.
And being a student of history, and especially our native history, the fact that it is some areas are considered sacred to the Native Americans, whether you agree with the religion or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, it would be like me going to a grave and peeing on somebody's grave. I'm sorry, that's desecration. That's basically what they did. I mean, it's really sad to see that it comes to something like that. Okay, if you want to take over the place, fine. But don't destroy everything. Don't destroy our history. I mean, it's no better than what ISIS is doing over in places like Palmyra. They've pretty much destroyed Palmyra, obliterated it. Whether they'll ever be able to recoup any of the history there that may be lost, who knows? It's kind of like the Library of Alexandria. We don't know. I mean, if the stories are true of Alexandria, think about all that we lost. And that's why I look at their ideology of the sovereign citizen movement so harshly, because to me it's no difference from any religion, and their desecration to me, their destroying of history, to me proves it. I mean, they're no different than ISIS, or as we like to use Daesh.
Daesh, however you say that. Now, Katie had a statement, and I was kind of curious. Well, first of all, a couple of you mentioned BLM. What does that mean? For
Bureau of Land Management. It does not mean Black Lives Matter. It does mean Bureau of Land Management.
Thank you, because that goes into what Katie said. She said there's something else going on with all this land. The Bureau of Land Management has been systematically destroying the Mustangs for several years now. Is she talking about horses, or?
Yes, she is talking about horses. That's an ongoing deal here in Arizona. We have wild horses here, and there are locals here in the Phoenix area who are very dedicated to protecting, in particular, the Salt River Band of Mustangs. It was recently in the news. But yeah, the BLM has been really pretty awful about that. But they have defenders, and they're doing the Lord's work as far as I'm concerned.
Gotcha. Okay, because that was outside my purview, and and I see Trippin over there, Trippin Fool, and he reminded us that somebody sent the occupiers a 55-gallon drum of lube to go with their dildos, etc. So. Yeah, that was actually the creator of a game called Cards Against Humanity, which, if you have not played, it's called, the tagline is a card game for horrible people, which I, of course, have some decks of, and it's quite fun. But, yeah, that's who sent the 55-gallon drum of lube down there. So I have to wonder what happened to that after all was said and done, like what does one do?
I don't know that it ever got delivered out there. I honestly don't know that it ever got delivered. They may have refused shipping.
They could have. That's a fair point too. Apparently, on another show I do, we looked it up one night, and something was only like $1,200 or $1,500 to send it on Amazon. So we're like, if you really want to get at somebody, you got an extra $1,500 laying around, But for somebody who's done well with business and whatnot. It was probably, he probably thought of it as an investment in entertainment. So now, Dee, you were talking about good things happening in regards to the FLDS too, since we're...
Yeah, let's talk about those guys. Things have not
Please.
been going well for them.
Poor muffins.
Poor muffins. They have just had a lot of problems lately, and I'm just thrilled that the states, Arizona and Utah, seem to just have a stick up their collective butts as far as dealing with these guys. So it's been pretty much left up to the feds, and as we know, when you're dealing with the federal government, it really takes a while. But the feds brought civil rights charges against twin towns of Hilldale
and Colorado City. Okay.
Otherwise known as the Crick.
Yes.
So for Short Creek, which is what it was originally called back in the day. But they were found to have violated the civil rights of non-FLDS members in the town by refusing to hook up water and some other things. Anyway, it is not certain what the remedy will be, what the feds are going to ask for. It may be that they ask for the marshal's office to be shut down. I hope so.
Yeah, and if people don't know, these two towns, they're virtually the same town, just like with a border in between. And the majority of residents belong to the FLDS, and I've seen video, and a lot of the homes have big, huge stone fences around them and whatnot. They're like little mini compounds, but the police force was run by the FLDS. They were pretty much all FLDS members. There's the town was pretty much all run by FLDS. And if you've ever seen video, if anybody even like drives through there, they're followed by these like trucks and like it's almost like it's almost the God Squad. It's almost like black helicopter kind of stuff, and they'll follow you and watch you and basically do everything they can to get you to get out of there. And so there are people that were living there that were not part of the FLDS, and so these
or they were former FLDS that have been kicked out because Warren Jeffs has been really winnowing down the flock he's got some really crazy stuff, and I am just going to mention the biggest one, which is the birth rate has absolutely fallen off a cliff in the Twin Towns. It used to be they were pumping out the babies like nobody's business the last 3 or 4 years because Warren dissolved all the marriages, okay?
Yes.
So what has happened is that, yes, you can have a kid, but basically it's religiously sanctioned rape, unless your husband is one of the 16 men who's been picked as the ones who can deposit the sacred seed. I think it was Lyle Jeff's wife, Charlene, that's another brother of Warren's, Charlene's Lyle's ex-wife, and she was a huge part of the verdict because she testified to all sorts of shenanigans going on. But one of the things that she put in her divorce papers was that they had this thing going with, having seed bearers, and if you wanted to have a kid, you had to have a seed bearer, and of course he was going to come in and rape you basically while your husband was standing there, and it just makes me want to throw up. So there's that. Now the thing about there's the civil rights case which has just concluded. Right after that happened, the feds moved in with a food stamp fraud case and picked up a bunch of people, several Jeffses who, full brothers of Warren. They are in jail right now. The government managed to get most of those guys in jail. They are looking at trial very soon. In fact, we may have a full complement of Bundys in Nevada and Oregon, and we may have Jeffs on trial at the same time. I think the trial may be scheduled for May. But there were a bunch of them arrested, a couple of women, bunch of men. and basically all food stamp charges. The last thing that's still coming up, and it's a civil case. It's being brought by the Department of Labor, and it's to hold the town and a FLDS business accountable for child labor. They were turning the kids loose in I forget the name of it. It was a pecan orchard. Yes. And the kids would have to go out and pick, and their monies were being, I mean, there were two violations. First of all, they weren't getting paid, and second, a lot of those kids were underage. Even with the, fairly lenient rules that they have for farm children, they were even underneath that. And so the
and it was a couple of years ago now, I think, but I remember it was on the news where and it was somebody who kind of watched what went on in the town, and I can't remember who the hell it is now, but I might have been a journalist.
It's Sam Brower. He's a private investigator. He's running He's running for county commissioner. Yes. He knows everybody. So
and he had heard, I guess, I'm not sure how, but he had heard that all the children had been removed from the school either the day before or that day, and he kind of had a feeling, and he drove by this pecan orchard and was like, there's all the children, and I've seen the video where they see him and they just start scurrying like rats everywhere, trying to get away from the cameras and from being seen that they were out there working. And I mean, there were toddlers out there, picking this stuff. Yeah, that's just.
Yeah, that was. But the government is going after them. The U.S. government is going after full force. I'm pleased, to see my tax dollars being spent this way.
Absolutely.
One thing you have to know about these guys is that they have absolutely no shame in ripping off the government. They call it bleeding the beast. That's right. And I forgot the other thing. Alyssa Wall, who wrote a autobiography about her forced marriage, aka rape, and that she won a judgment, and so it'll go back for trial now, against the FLDS and the trust, which has been taken into state control, has been in state control for several years now. But she can now sue the trust for what happened.
Good.
So that was as of last Friday. So that's the most recent news. But things have not gone well for the FLDS lately, and the food stamp thing has really, the government went in and pretty much cut the head off the leadership of the organization, because I can't call it a church, because it was all Warren's brothers.
Yes.
I think what's important about the food stamp thing, besides the fact that it eliminated about $1.3 million in fraud, is that it was also kind of a money-making scheme for them. Because what happened, a lot of people don't understand, is I get food stamps, so it'd be like, let's say Deb's the leader of my church. I would give my food stamps to her, and then I would have to buy my food back from her.
Yes.
Well, what they were doing is they were turning it over to the store, to the storehouse, and the storehouse was, they were redistributing the benefits to people who were not qualified, and B, they weren't, people weren't getting their benefits at all. So they were skimming, and people who weren't qualified to get the benefits were getting the benefits. So it was a real scam. It'd been going on for decades, but
Well, the thing that's sickening about that is that people that qualify for SNAP, in general, not specifically with FLDS, but in general, it's to supplement your food choices. In other words, make sure you are eating healthier, or healthful foods. The people that were, quote, donating their stamps back to the church, most of them were lucky enough to even get subsistence food. In other words, so the hierarchy was getting all the good shit, the lobster and the crab legs, while the peons were basically getting rice and beans. So there was a disparity there, and not that you can't live off of rice and beans. God knows Dave Ramsey quotes he lived off it for years. I highly doubt that. I have my views on him on that story, but I mean, so these people were living with malnutrition, but yet they were getting food stamps. I think that's what really kills me about that. I mean, being one that gets food stamps, you know, I'm very careful with what I buy with my food stamps. You won't see me go out and buy, you know, I don't eat beef, but so I supplement with a lot of seafood that when I can afford it. And it's just like, these guys were barely getting anything to live off of, period.
Yeah, in fact, I have seen reports where there is a food crisis in the Twin Towns because for that very reason.
Yeah, wow. And the sad thing is these people who do qualify, they don't know how they're going to adjudicate this, because do they get their benefits back or do they not?
Yep, and it's terrible because so many of them are kids.
Yes, and that's what a lot of people don't understand with SNAP. A lot of the times, yes, the parents get the benefits, but the benefits are actually for the kids. The parents, they themselves may not qualify, but the kids do. And these benefits, I mean, most of our food, 65% of our food stamps go to children and senior citizens. It does not go to, you know, to single parent or to adults, single adults, excuse me. It goes for children. It goes for senior care. It brings them up out of poverty, and they're not even getting that benefit now because of the fraud. These people may not get the help that they need, all because of fucking brainwashing.
And if you think about it, you know, you've got kids now that aren't getting the nutrition they need, and then they're being told, oh, well, today you can't go to school, you have to go out and pick pecans out in the field all day. And what is that? You know, those poor kids. And not, on top of that, a lot of them, as Dee was saying, that the marriages have been dissolved, and what was happening is, you know, somebody didn't look the right way or do the right thing or showed the least little bit of questioning. Oh, well, we're taking away all your wives and children and giving them to X guy over here. So then you've got all these kids that, you know, well, that's not your daddy anymore. This is your daddy and whatnot. And I mean, the damage being done is just astronomical.
And what makes this kind of comical is we can sit here and bitch about the LDS church doing this, and this is another thing that you posted about, is the whole debacle with Mark Driscoll and his church.
Oh, God.
It's the exact same thing, because I mean, although it doesn't have the fraud involved, it probably is there.
Oh, well, actually, there is fraud involved in that.
Well, I'm specifically referring to the food stamps, but...
Right, this is
for those of us who are uninformed, what's the Mark Driscoll situation?
Okay, so Mark Driscoll used to pastor a church, actually a mega church called Mars Hill up in Seattle. And I don't know how much you guys know about Mark Driscoll, but he was the most misogynistic. I mean, he first came to my attention when he said that that Ted Haggard wouldn't have gone for the boys and the meth if Gail Haggard, Ted's wife, had kept herself up. Oh. That's how he first came to my attention, and I sent him a nastygram at that point because, you know, it's like, dude, you just ended up on my list. That was 10 years ago. I've kept an eye on the guy. What happened is that his church grew bigger and bigger, and kind of like a Ponzi scheme in a way, he was taking more money in, or taking less money in than he really needed to fund things. So he was shaking his membership down. One of the things that he came up with was the Mars Hill Global Fund. And what was supposed to happen with the Global Fund was that this was supposed to be used for missionary work in India and Ethiopia. What we're finding out now is that really most of the money was going to be used for Mars Hill church plants, and that seems to have been what happened. And small amounts of money were going to go, I mean, and we're talking small, like $10,000 small on, you know, $3 million taken in. seriously, to India
Wow.
and Ethiopia. So people are upset. A civil RICO suit has been filed. But let me tell you what happened. In 2014, all this stuff started coming together. It wasn't, again, the Global Fund was one thing. People really didn't know what was going on. But what was happening was there were complaints coming out that Driscoll was, just absolutely being, beaten on his people figuratively. He wasn't actually beating people up. He's not David Miscavige of Scientology. Okay?
Yes.
So, but he was, he was really harsh on his people. He has said, is recorded as saying he would throw people under the Mars Hill bus. But he was caught out plagiarizing in some of his books, and then it came out that he had used church money to get his book Real Marriage, which had some rather salacious stuff about sex in it, on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, we're not talking a small amount of money here. Apparently it was $250,000. Like, I would like that money. So he did that. All the stuff happened. His board of elders finally grew a pair and said, we need to put you under discipline. He had been out for a month, basically considering his options, and he decided, this was the end of summer 2014. Now keep this in mind, 2014, we're not even 2 years, right?
Yes.
And he decided, nope, not going to do that. I am leaving. What happened is that pretty much left Mars Hill as a big smoking crater. All those churches, there is no Mars Hill in Seattle anymore. It's gone. Some of the churches were able to set up, and they still go on. I know that there was a plant here in Phoenix. They changed their name to like Phoenix Bible Church or whatever. I don't even know if they're still a going concern almost 2 years on. But that's what happened. So, he kind of dropped off the scene, but he would appear every now and then at various things. And he went from being a darling of the Reformed movement, like John Piper, those guys, and instead he started hanging out with charismatics like Robert Morris, who has a huge, huge, huge church in Dallas. So he started going to those things. He went to oh God, what is that? Hillsong. Like, I should remember this. I drive by the newest Hillsong franchise every day going to work. It's like, we don't need these guys here. We've got a new Hillsong franchise here in Phoenix. We've got Driscoll setting up shop. We don't need these guys. The Valley of the Sun does not need these people. So he has these new backers and whatever, and he moves to Scottsdale, which, of course, if anybody has ever been to Arizona, you know that Scottsdale's a really Tony place and kind of snooty and that sort of thing. And so he's probably living in a gated community somewhere with his wife and his several kids, and plotting his return. Well, he announced a few weeks ago that several months ago, he had started the thing called the Trinity Church, the Trinity Church. I want you to know, the Trinity Church. And he was, they were going to get that started. Then he latched on to, fortuitously, a church landmark. It was Glass and Garden Church, which was kind of Phoenix's answer to the Crystal Cathedral back in the 60s. It had Drive Up Church. And it's actually architecturally interesting. It's one of the, believe it or not, it's one of the older buildings in Scottsdale because, well, Scottsdale is a newish town, like pretty much everything in Arizona. So it's 50 years old. He latched onto that. The former megachurch, what is it? Living Word Bible Church, which is within 2 miles of me, yet another megachurch, a Prosperity Doctrine church, had moved out of that building and is now meeting in a hotel, which says something because they couldn't make a go of it in this building, and so they ended up giving it up. So Driscoll took it over, and he decided he was going to have his resurrection on Easter Sunday at 5 p.m., where he was going to have a prayer meeting and a carnival. Well, I just decided that would not do here, and so I went out there. There were a couple guys. One guy drove down from Vegas, of all places. A couple of local guys. But we were out there in front. They called the cops. 4 middle-aged people. Come on, 4 middle-aged people. They sent out 2 cruisers and an SUV. And the cops were so nice. I mean, seriously, it's like stay on the sidewalk, don't go on the street, don't block the sidewalk. Those are the rules.
Yeah.
Driscoll's people were not so happy about us being there, but one guy, he actually brought us bottles of water, which was really nice because it was very dusty. So, but he's really making a go of it. I mean, it's the little things that you notice, like you could tell all the volunteers were wearing lanyards that said the Trinity Church on it. You know, it's like he's throwing some money at it. But, you know, it'll be curious to see how he goes because he was really pretty much a darling of the Reformed people. And the Reformed people are not too thrilled on charismatics. So I have, you know, it would be interesting to see how he actually runs that, if he you know, how charismatic he goes to keep up with his. I think he's being sponsored by Robert Morris. I honestly think that they're slipping him money under the table, but I could be wrong. So, but that's Driscoll for you, and we, unfortunately, here in Phoenix, we've got him. Like I said, we've got the Hillsong people. I did go. Oh, I should tell you about that. That was 3 weeks ago.
Please.
Somebody asked me, I don't know how many people sat auditorium seats. We can't tell from the pictures. Can you go and sit in a service and, you know, kind of do a head count, see how full it is and how many does it seat? So I went, oh my God, I forgot my earplugs. Oh God, and I like metal. Okay, I love metal, all right? These people were so loud. It was so loud. A friend of mine called during the service, during the preaching, and the only reason I knew he was calling was because I was looking at my phone at that moment when it popped up and started ringing, because it was so loud. I am never going back. And when I discovered that the auditorium really does seat probably close to 2,000 people.
So were they like yelling, quote, in tongues and crap, or?
No, it was just very loud. You know, the music was loud. I mean,
so it was like they were trying to get that rock concert sort of
Yes, it was
atmosphere.
a rock concert vibe. That's exactly what I kept looking for the mosh pit. You know,
you could have got up there and started banging into people.
I should have. You know, of course, being middle-aged and all that, they would have thought I was weird or on drugs or something like that.
I'm middle-aged, and I'll still go headbanging if I had the opportunity.
You know, the music wasn't exactly headbanging as far as I was concerned.
Well, no, but
it wasn't really like driving chords and stuff like that. But it was just, it's like they had literally turned it up to 11, and so it was just crazy.
There's a lot of those churches seem to think that that's how they can keep the young people interested, I think.
Well, well, you know, they had a lot of young people there. I mean, really young to me people, but you know, but there were some older people there. What's funny is watching the transformation of the pastor who used, you know, he's probably my age, and older pictures show him with graying hair. You can tell he's dyed his hair. He may have had a facelift or some Botox done, and he's now wearing skinny jeans. Mm-hmm. It is so funny, and so, you know, I watch this and it's like, I cannot believe this is happening in Mesa, Arizona, which is like, if you know anything about Mesa, Arizona, it was founded by Mormons. I live 3 miles from a Mormon temple. I've got 10 Mormon ward houses within 3 miles of my house, and each one of those has 2 to 4 congregations in it. So it's like this area is very heavily Mormon. But you know that part does not bother me. I mean, it's the you know, the many mega churches in the area. I mean, you know, we've got the Living Word people, we've got the Hillsong people, and you know, but there's just, and then there's Central Christian Church of the East Valley, which is also a mega near me. Wow. So it's just a weird little situation here. You know, I'm not against people going to church, and I actually went to church yesterday. It was Easter, so it's not. But what I have a problem with is when churches decide that they are going to interfere in the state and think they have a privilege to do so, which is why I get all huffy about people like
Yeah.
Ken Ham. He wants privilege.
Yes,
Or the FLDS who think that they're, they can just bleed the beast. No, you cannot do that. But
yeah.
I will never go to Hillsong again. I mean, seriously, it was damaging to my ears.
Yeah, it sounds like you needed your earplugs. Jeez. But yeah, and a lot of these big mega churches, like you say, pointing out several cases that there is things like fraud happening, and then you get, pastors who are breaking the law on their own. They're doing drugs and all kind of crap, in their own time, and it's just they're kind of like pockets of disease almost in a way to me.
Well, what's frustrating, you get somebody like Kent Hovind who thinks he's done no wrong, and
Yes.
he's sitting here pulling a blowjob on every person that he can to try to prove that he didn't do any wrong. When you get somebody like Robert who, this is his field. I mean, for people that are unaware, this is what Robert did. He worked for the IRS. He knows the IRS laws. And he, to say, oh, well, I didn't do anything wrong. And he won't even take up Robert's challenge. I mean, he literally runs away from it. He says, oh,
Yes.
my champions. Well, your champions are as fucking stupid as you are.
And
Yeah, they won't even, I mean, it's simple. I mean, and I think you'll agree with this, we'll open up, 3 hours of Beyond the Trailer Park for you guys to debate. You and I will just sit back and just, run the controls, let you guys debate.
Absolutely.
And, the offer's there. Rob's put it out there quite publicly.
Yep.
And I do follow Rob's opinions and what he posts, and Deana's and Pluto's, because I can't follow everything, but I mean, just to give you an idea, just for tonight, we talked about Kent Hovind and his fiasco. We didn't even get to Sean Thomas Stuhler, who is taking legal advice from Ken Hovind and Paul Hansen and losing badly. We have Chris Pavey letter for the Alabama fiasco. We have, Rudy Davis. We have the FDLS. We talked about Mark Briscoe. We've talked about Dan Biondi, Kristen Hall, Pete Santilli, the Bundys, and the list goes on. And this is why I rely on what these guys post, because one person cannot cover these issues, and they're important issues. I mean, I had somebody say, "Well, why are you even talking about Ken Hovind? He's worthless." No, because in the bigger picture, he ties in with Oregon. He ties in with BLM. There's things behind it that pull these all together. Even with the FDL Church, the Bundys are Mormons. I don't know, and you can correct if I'm wrong. Are they FDLS or are they?
No, they're regular. They're regular Mormon. They're very conservative. A lot of Mormons, even ones who are really, really conservative, would have strenuously objected to what they were doing.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, they
I bet you I wouldn't be surprised if they get excommunicated before too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and where does that leave that? Okay, well, let's hypothetically, they're hanging out on a string, excommunicated. Well, who do you think they might try to overtake? Oh, well, there's Warren's Jeff's group. What does that sound like? That reminds me of David Koresh.
Yeah.
And this is why I try to watch to see where it's going, and it's just like I posted today. I have friends that are in the LGBT community, and they'll sit there and they claim to be Christian, and I'm not going to argue that point whether they are or aren't. But yet they're angry at other Christians because they treat them like they're subhuman. And it's like, well, if you look at the underlying premise behind Christianity and the Bible, you'll understand why.
Yeah.
But yet, and it's just the same thing with the SovCit movement and all that we talked tonight, is that underlying all this is religion, as Deana pointed out, when the religions try to dictate to those of us who don't believe the same way, whether we're atheists or not. That's where the problems come in. I mean, we have a presidential candidate who has point blank said, "I'm a Christian first and an American second." Oh, the Dominionist movement doesn't exist. Yeah, hello, yes it does.
And he's kind of actually a Canadian, but that's a whole other ball.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go there for your sake.
Yeah. But and Trippin just said in reference to the Bundys that they're getting too many donations for their stints to be excommunicated. So maybe they won't. I don't know.
Actually, they're not getting the public. They're not. It seems like Ammon is soaking up most of the money, but I think the last I heard, he picked up $84,000, and believe me, that is not going to pay a lawyer who's charging $300, $400, $500 an hour. Trust me, that is not even beginning to cover how much the lawyer is going to cost. So I would say the other defendants are smart, in my mind, by going with federal public defenders. Those guys are top-notch. I mean, they are seriously well-skilled. If there's anybody who can get them out of the mess that they're in, if they will pay attention and not be Ryan Bundy, who wants to represent himself and who has had his Feretta hearing, and oh my God, he's representing himself.
I don't like to disparage somebody with a disability, but I have to wonder if he's got some head injury issues, that guy.
I don't know.
Yeah. He's the one that had the car accident when he was young, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the one that had a car basically roll over his head, and that's why he's got the problem with his lip. Yeah,
that makes me wonder if there's not some undiagnosed issues there, because he's almost as messed up in his decisions as Finicum was.
Well, if you look at it, though, one of the premises with the sovereign cit movement, unless you get a sovereign cit lawyer, and like Deana said, you're not $84,000 is not going to take you very far. They're going to represent themselves, whether they are smart enough to or not. I mean, even with my background in what law I do have, I would never, ever assume. I mean, if I disagreed with my lawyer where I would be to the point of representing myself, I'd get a different lawyer first.
Yeah. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, folks, we're coming up on the end of the evening here, so we'll just make the rounds through everybody. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. It was a very informative discussion. I learned a bunch of stuff that I didn't know, so definitely thank you for that. So I'll just go through everybody. So Deana, where can anybody find you if they want to look up your work or what you have to say?
I have a website at hovindology.org that I haven't updated lately. That's got the Kent Hovind documents. Right. I'm also on Facebook, so you can find me on the Book of Face.
Awesome. Well, and Beth and I have been talking. One of these weeks, we want to go through Hovind's quote thesis and kind of illustrate.
That would be painful. Oh my God, it would be so. You know what would be more fun though? Would be to go through his recent it's called More Recent, and he claims to have gotten another doctorate out of it. What in the world is happening? Because he switched over from being a premillennialist to being a postmillennialist based on stuff Stephen Anderson told him. He wrote a book about it. So that and this particular book it's illustrated, and it looks like something that Harun Yahya, who puts out that creationist stuff from Turkey. The same kind of illustration, cut and paste stuff. But it might be interesting, to spend 30 minutes on that.
That could be. Well, we have to see, because I've thumbed through the quote thesis, and I find it to be kind of hilarious myself. But, anyway. Pluto, do you have anything that you, where can people find your work and read your stuff?
Me? Work?
Yeah, you.
You just see me on Facebook and on the Fogbow pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
here and there.
Okay.
I really appreciate the work Robert does to keep old Kent Hovind in his crosshairs because that guy's
Oh
boring
God.
me to tears nowadays.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was that,
I do
Beth?
appreciate. Oh, Robert keeps up with Kent's craziness. I can't listen to the guy more than 5 minutes without wanting to throw a brick through a
Well,
window.
now
Every day.
there's a
Uh,
guy. There's a channel on YouTube. He's actually a Canadian guy. Goes by Logicked, and
Yeah.
he has a multi-part series that I think it's up to like part 12 now that he's done over the course of a couple of years, and he's gotten a hold of a lot of Kent's old videos where he goes on about creationism, and he like debunks it piece by piece, and it's quite a feat of accomplishment, really. But definitely, if you're interested, Logicked is the guy who does it, and he's really. There's another creationist that he's got on there, but he does spend a lot of time on old Kent there. But speaking of Robert, where do we find you?
Kent Hovind and Joe Hovind versus USA on Facebook. Logic's work on my Facebook page, a little profane but good material.
Yeah.
And I would maybe wrap up by referring back to Sean Stuller, which Beth recently mentioned. Kent Hovind is a comedian. He spends a lot of time making fun of other people and telling jokes.
Yes.
But sometimes it's just not funny, like sending his wife to prison.
No.
And Sean
Yes.
Stuller is another case. Sean Stuller is another case where it gets real serious. He ran into Kent and Paul Hansen in prison, and I'm convinced that if you look at the record, you will see that Sean Stuller, had it not been for Hansen and Hovind, would have made a deal and got maybe a 5-year, 4-year sentence. But instead, he just got 20 years. And they're ranting and raving and trying to blame everybody but themselves for that 20 years.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame, but I don't know that Sean found God and thought everything was going to be cool if he just converted. I think he saw this as a scheme, as a way to get out, and he didn't. It didn't work for him.
Didn't work so well. So, Beth, where do we find you?
well, first I want to thank all three of you guys for coming on. As I said, you guys are my go-to people on all things Kent Hovind and goofy shit, and I appreciate your insights. And I know we barely scratched the surface, and I'm going to push Rob's website if you really want more information. That's where to get it. Or you can Google Kent Hovind. One question I do have for both Deana and for Pluto is, if people want to hook up with you on Facebook, can they send you friend requests or anything like that, or how do you want to?
I tend to be really picky about my friends because I used to be indiscriminate, but I'm much pickier now because I've had some strange things happen. So if I don't know you, I'm probably not going to friend you.
Okay, so if you guys do have questions that any of the three can answer, you can send them to me or to them. We'll get it to them. It's understandable why they do that. So I mean, we've all been in situations where we can't be out when what we do on our spare time. So, but the easiest way to find me is on Twitter, which is Dune998. That connects both Facebook and my blog. I'm hoping to start posting stuff again this week. I can at least now maneuver my mouse so I can do copy and paste.
Yay!
My typing's still slow.
That's okay.
I went from 120 words a minute down to about 5. But that's the easiest way to find me. Facebook, it's Beth A. Hambridge. Make sure you put the A in there, or you'll get my vanilla page, which has nothing. And Blogger, it is havocandchaos.com. So that's the easiest way to find me.
So I, of course, have Atheist Apocalypse, which you can find at atheistapocalypse.com. We released another episode today. We're at episode 5 of season 2, so do check that out. And interestingly, we got picked up by iHeartRadio this week, so you'll be able to find Atheist Apocalypse over there, which is kind of exciting. So. And Beyond the Trailer Park has a new website. We now have beyondthetrailerpark.com. And you can find all of the links to where the show is. And we've actually I got us through on Stitcher this week, so you can get Beyond the Trailer Park on Stitcher, iTunes, and Spreaker. But all of those links are at beyondthetrailerpark.com. And I'm also maintaining a list of our upcoming shows on there as well. So you'll be able to see, hopefully ahead of time, who's going to be on and what we're going to talk about. Next week we were supposed to have a rather interesting theist possibly coming on that Foda and I were debating with, and Foda tried to get him to come on. So he said he would, but you know how those things kind of go. And the guy's from Australia, so we have the puppy. There's Boo Boo. Oh, he's a cutie. For those of you who are listening on the podcast later, you're gonna have to go on to YouTube and take a look at Pluto's little pooch, the Boo Boo pooch there, who's a cutie pie.
Got his bone.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's got something he's playing with there. So yeah, we'll see if we can get this person to come on and join us for a bit of a debate with Foda next week. Kind of iffy, so we may have to come up with a plan B, but we will definitely be here next week at the same time as usual. Also coming up, if you do take a look at the website, we are having back-to-back. We had Cash on a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to continue through with the original Atheists on Air crew. We'll have Professor Steven coming on, and we're going to do a giant snake oil woo-woo segment. And Rachel Nana Brown's going to come on, and we're going to talk about evolutionary sexuality. So that's going to be fun. Because, you know, she knows her evolution shit, that's for sure. So that's coming up too. So until then, I guess, as always, we will leave you with Dave Foda's Humanist Creed. And if folks could mute for me, that would be awesome. Oops. I haven't done that in a while.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being, with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.